In quarter four of 2021, GM did a killer job on the EV front. They delivered 26 EVs to customers. Wow, they are actually killing themselves. For those of you interested in investing, check out Webull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $2,300. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So it's been big news that GM only sold 26 EVs into the market in quarter four of 2021. They're promising they're going to get the Bolt back online in February-ish, and I guess eventually they'll produce some Hummers out for customers as well. But what I really want to talk about today is not GM's EV market, but the fact that they are actually going to be bankrupt by 2025. At least that's my prediction. Now, before I continue down this rabbit hole, a couple of caveats here. First of all, not a stock analyst, so this is not stock advice or anything like that. Do your own research. Second of all, I'm only looking at publicly available information, so I don't have anything that anybody else doesn't have or can't get a hold of. And number three, this doesn't include if the United States government steps in and does some sort of bailout. It might be called a bailout, but it also might be called something like an EV tax credit or something. So anyway, if the US government really steps in and helps GM out, then this is off the table. But what I'm saying is that if market forces are the sole determinant, GM really can't survive for 3 more years or 4, depending on how you want to count it. And of course, I'm singling GM out for today's episode, but this is true for pretty much all the legacy auto manufacturers. So all of them are in this position to one extent or another. It seems like GM, however, is the poster child of being in a really, really bad position right now. All right, so why am I so confidently saying that by the end of 2025, GM will have declared bankruptcy unless the US government steps in? Basically, it comes down to 3 factors. Number 1 is debt, number 2 is car sales, and number 3 is the EV transition that is happening really, really rapidly right before our eyes. So according to the latest figures I could find, on September 21st of 2021, GM had $108.6 billion of long-term debt. And just to put this in context, let's look a little historically at this. In 2009, GM had about $5.5 billion of debt, and at the end of 2020, they had about $72 or $73 billion of debt. So they have grown their debt about $35 or $36 billion in the last year alone. So debt is the number 1 strike against GM. Number 2 is auto sales. And auto sales have been on a decline. Actually, if you look all the way back at like 2005 or 2006, prior to the 2008 market crash, they were selling about 4 million cars per year. After the crash, they came back up to about 3 million cars per year in 2015, but they've been on a steady decline ever since. In 2019, GM sold about 2.9 million cars into the US market, and at the end of 2021, the 2021 year, they sold about 2.2 million cars into the US market, and of course, Toyota very publicly beat them with about 2.33 million cars in the US market. So this is the first time in 70 years that GM was not the market leader in the US market. Now, interestingly enough, Tesla has sold 302,000 cars into the US market in 2021, which equates to about 13.5% of what GM sold. So that's actually rather fascinating because, as you might notice, Tesla is on an increasing between 50 and 80% per year. At least that's the projection for a while. And GM is on quite a steep decline. So it's not going to be that much longer before Tesla reaches 50% of what GM is selling. And then, of course, eventually will match GM and pass it. And that's assuming GM doesn't go bankrupt and basically go out of business before then. As for global sales, I don't have the final numbers for 2021. If you found those, definitely let me know. I couldn't track that down. But globally, of course, GM has been in quite the downward trend the last several years. So they peaked at about 2016, if I'm remembering correctly, and they've been on a decline since then globally as well as locally in the US market. So of course, GM and GM defenders will say that all of this is related to the pandemic and the chip shortage, etc., etc. But the interesting fact here, and what caused me to actually want to do this video, was I drove down the strip of auto dealers recently in Athens. There's kind of a large strip of them. I usually don't go that way. And I saw all the dealerships. A couple of months ago, the parking lots were empty. There were no cars in there. And most of them, not just GM, but like Ford and Nissan and I think Honda and Kia, there were several of them, and there were a whole lot more cars in the parking lot. It was not absolutely jam-packed, but it looked a lot more pre-pandemic and pre-chip shortage than it has the last several months. So that seems to be a bad indicator. And when I looked it up, at the end of quarter 3, GM was at 128,757 units or cars in dealership parking lots. And now they're up to 199,662 at the end of quarter four. And of course, what you don't really want to have is a large inventory sitting for a long time. That's not a good indication of customer demand. If they've been very, very constrained by the chip shortage, as they say they have, and that's the reason why they've had declining sales numbers, they shouldn't really have an uptick in their inventory ever because, as a consumer, if I'm waiting for a Chevy Silverado or whatever it is, and it's off the lot and I've been waiting and waiting and waiting, as soon as it comes on the lot, I'm gonna buy it. So it really doesn't make an awful lot of sense. The narrative that they've been saying for quite a while here is chip shortage, pandemic, can't possibly produce enough cars. That's the reason why our sales are going down. But seeing an uptick in inventory between quarter three and quarter four seems like a pretty contrary indicator to that narrative. And of course, that brings up the issue of dealerships, which is a big albatross around the neck of all legacy auto manufacturers. And so what you do is, of course, GM sells their cars to a dealership. The dealership then sells it to people. GM doesn't have a huge amount of control over exact pricing or the nature of the way that they sell these cars. So anyway, having this large inventory is a negative. It to some extent, GM is selling the cars to the dealerships, and I think that they actually get paid when they sell the cars to the dealerships rather than when the dealerships sell the cars. So this may not affect GM's income right this second, and I could be wrong about that. They might actually not get paid until the dealership sells the cars to the consumers. But anyway, whatever it is, they might be a little bit slippery in terms of exactly how much income GM is talking about having right now versus how much they really have, because all of this inventory that's sitting there is going to create a buffer between when people want to buy a car and when they will actually purchase a new car that GM is building right now. And of course, GM is profit sharing with the dealerships in terms of, even if they make $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 or whatever on a particular car, GM doesn't get all of that profit. They only get a small chunk of that, and the dealership gets the rest of it. So it's not an ideal situation because they've got a middleman, and a middleman is always taking some of the profit, and that is an issue for legacy auto and in particular GM. So we've got drastically increasing debt and drastically decreasing sales and dealership and increasing inventory. The third aspect of this, and one of the driving factors of all of this, is the EV transition that's happening so rapidly. So of course, the statistics over the past several years, not just for GM, but for all ICE manufacturers, is decline in sales over the last several years since the mid-2010s, 2015, 2016 approximately. It's been going downhill since then. And in the meantime, EV sales have been rapidly going up pretty drastically. So of course people might say, yeah, but that's still only a couple of percent of the total sales, but that's not really true anymore in smaller countries where it's easier to make this transition faster because they don't have as many car sales per year. You see Norway, Denmark, even a large country like Germany has now got a massive amount of BEVs being sold into the market every year. And this third factor is what really spells doom for GM, in my opinion. Again, just my opinion. What I see happening is that the ICE vehicle sales are going to continue to collapse, and GM at the same time is going to have to take on more debt in order to transition to BEV cars because people are not interested in buying ICE cars anymore. At least a growing number of them aren't. And sure, some people, and the United States is its own outlier, right? There are not nearly as many BEVs in the United States per capita as there are in many, many other countries. But it's going to happen, we're laggards or not. So GM will still sell into the US market for a period of time, but they need China, they need Europe, they need South America, they need a lot of other markets to sell into as well to remain even close to profitable. So all of those factors are working against them, and they're going to have to make major investments into transitioning to electric vehicles and smart vehicle technology and all of that stuff like GM Cruise. All of those sorts of things are all happening together with a decline in sales and an increase in debt. And here's the thing, all it would take would be 1 quarter of not making any sales. So just, imagine hypothetically that GM went from selling about 750,000 cars in a quarter-ish to selling 0 for 1 quarter. They'd be out of business. That's all it takes. And so, obviously that is a drastic thing, but all it takes is incrementally reducing the number of sales that they have. That means that each car they produce is more expensive to produce because, of course, you don't have the economies of scale, and you've got less money, you've got less revenue coming in, and your debt has to go up because you're having to retool these factories at the exact same time and pay new employees, expensive employees who are people, who work in AI and who work in electrical engineering and things like that. So you've got a whole bunch of things going on at the same time. And GM was not, if they were in a strong position, if they'd had like really, really low amounts of debt, like, $5 billion or something like that, at the start of this whole process, they could have made it through. But just like most other legacy auto manufacturers, they are super saddled with debt right at the moment where they really need the ability to borrow a ton of money and to be able to use that money to retool and manufacture new types of vehicles entirely with new electronics, new motors, all of that kind of stuff at the exact same time that they're losing revenue. So they've got too much debt, they've got too little sales, and they're too late to the party in terms of creating BEVs. And so in my opinion, again, by the end of 2025, GM is going to have to declare bankruptcy unless the United States government steps in and helps them out. And I think a lot of other legacy auto manufacturers are going to have to do the same thing, but I think GM, just watch GM. I believe that they are the bellwether for all of this. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it fun and thought-provoking, and maybe you can give me some responses in the comments about what you think about whether GM is going to survive the middle of this decade. Just think about that. We're only talking about 3 to 4 years from now, right? We're at the beginning of 2022. We're talking about mid to end of 2025. They're going to go bankrupt. So that's a very short period of time. I think a lot of people think if these companies are going to go bankrupt, it will be in like 2030 or something. But the BEV transition that's happening and the reduction in ICE sales that's consequently going on, that double S curve where the BEVs are rising rapidly and ICE sales are falling rapidly, is creating a perfect storm for bankruptcy for GM. Anyway, if you did enjoy the episode, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a big shout out to my patrons on Patreon. You all are wonderful. And a special shout out to Nikolai Tandrup, who is the first megawatt supporter of the channel. And as a thank you for that, you get your name at the end of each studio video from now on. Thank you. And of course, if you want to join the club, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in some awesome merch, check out the link in the description. We've got the Tesla Bot t-shirt, which is super popular these days. Don't mess with Tesla. Lots of other t-shirts, tumblers, mugs, etc. So check out the link in the description and help the channel out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out Webull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $2,300. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you. And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. Till next time, bye-bye.